Hello and welcome, it's Lydia here. Last week I made my dream dress and I showed you a comprehensive tutorial on how to sew it. I've linked this video below. I really enjoyed making this dress and I'd have to say that it's hands down my most favorite dress in my wardrobe. I promised to show you how to create the pattern, so that is what we are going to tackle today. Before we get started, I would love if you joined the sewing fam and subscribed. Hit that like button if you want to support me and ring the bell if you want to be notified of my newest posts. Also, I sell patterns and they all have YouTube tutorials. My shop is linked below if you want to check it out. Okay, let's get started. To create this pattern, you will need bodice, sleeve, and skirt blocks. I've started a series on drafting blocks. Currently, I only have the pant block, but stay tuned because I plan to make a block of each kind and show you all how to do it. To begin, trace out your front and back bodice blocks on a piece of paper. Find your bust radius by measuring from your nipple to under bust. Multiply the radius by 2 to get the diameter and draw a circle with this diameter with your bust point at the center. Also, establish your front and back neckline. Lower your armholes by 1 inch and establish the half back line on your back bodice, which is about 4 inches down from the center back neckline. From the center of your back waist dart, draw a line through the dart point to the half back line. Move your underarm in 1/2 inch and the upper area of your armhole in 3/4 of an inch. This will make it so that the sleeve will fit on your shoulder better without sliding off. On your bodice front, establish your under bust line. Create a curved line up to the center front and carry the under bust line to the armhole. On your back bodice, create a new dart with a point at the half back line. You are then going to trace or cut out these pieces. Add notches along your under bust. One notch should be 1.5 inches away from the center front, and the other one should be about 1.5 inches away from the left dart leg. This is the area that will be gathered after we slash and spread the bust portion. I like to concentrate the gathers toward the front to eliminate side bust volume. Separate the bust cut portion from the bodice. Pivot the base dart halfway closed to open up a dart in the neckline. This just evens out the bust piece for spreading. At this point, you could actually contour this piece for a fitted bust cup, but we'll leave that for another time. Also add center front notches, one in line with your bust point for where you will stop sewing, and a pair that are 1/2 inch from the neckline for where the bust tie will go. Take your cup and section it evenly, numbering it as well. I made 5 sections. Before cutting, draw a straight line across the cup, 90 degrees to the center front. Draw a line on another piece of paper, then cut out your cup into sections and line up the pieces in order along the guideline. I place each piece 1 inch apart. Outline the resulting cup shape, retaining your notches, and this is your final bust cup piece. We will add seam allowance to all of your bodice pieces later. Lastly, create a rectangle 16 inches by 1.25 inches for your bust tie. This piece is the only piece that will not require seam allowance. Onto the sleeve. Trace out your sleeve block. Lower your armhole by how much you lowered your bodice armholes. That was 1 inch for me. Also shorten your sleeve to the desired length. Because my sleeve block is so narrow and pointy, I also lowered the height of the sleeve cap a bit, but that's optional. Section your sleeve into equal sections between the sleeve cap notches. Number these sections and draw a guideline straight across the sleeve. Next, draw a line on another piece of paper just like we did with the bust cup. Cut out the sleeve sections and line them up in order, matching the guidelines. With 7 sections, I spread it about 1 inch between each piece. Outline the new shape, adding a bit of height to the sleeve. Next, I walk the sleeve along the front and back bodice. I flip over my sleeve piece so that the single notch side, which is the front, can line up with the front bodice armhole. Then I just walk the sleeve along the armhole of the front bodice. I move the notch to the top edge of the bodice armhole where the neckline is, and I also do the exact same thing for the back. This way I know where my sleeve will finish lining up with the bodice. Now that I have established the new notch placements, I know that my ruffle extension can be added directly between the notches. I add a 1/2 inch extra in this area, smoothing it down to line up with the underarm shape of the sleeve at the notches. After this, I'm measuring the distance between both notches and creating a rectangle using this distance. The length is the distance plus 1.5 inches on each side. The width of the piece is 1/2 inch for the ruffle portion plus 3/8 of an inch for the elastic casing area. So a total of 7/8 of an inch, just shy of an inch. We will add a 1/4 inch seam allowance later. This will be a bias strip that will be sewn along the sleeve cap on the inside of the sleeve to create a ruffle and elastic casing. On to the skirt. Start by tracing your skirt blocks out. Draw a line straight down from the dart ends. Cut this line from the hem to the dart end, then close the dart, creating flare in the skirt. Then outline the new shape, and I added a bit more flare from the hip to the hem. For the slit seam, I drew a line from where the dart was to the hem, making sure that the front center bodice panel lined up perfectly. Add a notch on each side of this line for where the sewing stops for the slit. Then you have 2 options for how you want the skirt to look. The centerpiece can be on fold, and you can have 3 pieces for the front with 2 seams. You could even make 2 slits if you wanted, or just sew up one of the seams. Or you can remove one of the seams altogether and just have 2 pieces with just 1 seam to the side. This is what I did, but either is perfectly fine. Then add seam allowance to every piece except the bust tie. I added 1/2 inch everywhere, except for the bias strip for the sleeve cap, which is only a 1/4 inch of seam allowance. All the grain lines are parallel to the center, front, or back of each original pattern block. Then you can label your pieces with the number of cuts. This number of cuts represents just the shell fabric. You would also cut this again in lining, except for the bias strip and bust tie. So where it says cut 2, you're going to cut 2 in both your shell fabric and your lining. For your lining pieces, it's nice to remove 1/8 of the neckline on the bodice. This will help keep the lining from poking out to the face of the garment. Similarly, you want the skirt lining to be a few inches shorter. I shortened mine by 2 inches. And that's it. That's the final pattern. I definitely recommend doing a toile first, testing it out, seeing how you like it, and then going ahead with your final fabric. I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot. Let me know in the comments what kind of garments you want to see me draft and make. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!